and things like that.
I'm sorry, Parisa. It looked like you came off mute, but I didn't hear anything.
Oh, can you hear me?
No, I can't hear you.
Oh, okay.
Can you all hear me?
Yes.
We
Okay.
can hear you, Teresa.
Yes, we can hear you.
You can hear me too?
I can hear
Excellent.
you.
No, I
I can
can't
hear
hear
you too.
you. I wonder if that's on my end. Can someone else speak?
Yes, I'm speaking. Can you hear me?
Oh, okay. I see David's talking, so that's definitely my end. Give me 1 second. Okay, that should be better.
Can
All
you hear
right.
us now?
Yes, yes, I can.
Okay, great. Go ahead and co-host me, Anthony.
Yeah, I did. Did
You
you get
did?
it?
Okay, great. I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I
Oh,
did. Thank you. I'll help you out with stuff.
all right. Cool. Um, I'm just checking on one more thing and then we can get started. So it looks like we have all of our panelists here today. Super excited for you all to meet everyone else. My name is Anthony David Jr. I'm with Empower DC. I'm a community organizer. Today I'm joined here with my director, Parisa Narosi, and also I see Sabrina Rose is also joining us today, our Ivy City community organizer. We still have a few more people joining in, so I'll probably give it another minute. Um, and then yeah, we could continue. So yeah, once again, thank you. I know, I mean, I probably will say this in the agenda, but if you all could start introducing yourselves in the chat, maybe your name, if you are affiliated with any organizations, put that there. And also, what ward everyone's from. I'm always curious to see our turnout throughout the city. And also, yes, the weather is really nice today. It's not that hot, which I'm thankful for. All right, are going to go ahead and get started. So, like I said before, my name is Anthony. I'm with Empire DC. So right now you all are introducing yourselves in the chat. So I'm definitely can't wait to go through and see who we have here today. And yeah, so thank you all for being here today. You know, the topic for today is going to be resiliency. But before we get started, I'm gonna go through a brief background of Empower DC, just a little bit, and then we're gonna get started with the presentations. We have a lot to learn today, and I definitely want to make sure we have time towards the end to answer any questions people may have, but also to kind of have more of a kind of open conversation type of Q&A where we're really, you know, discussing what resiliency looks like within our community and making sure that we are, you know, being collaborative and looking at different ways to make our community safer in the wake of climate change. So I definitely want to, you know, spirit any ideas or, you know, anything for further next steps. You know, I would love to see, you know, what comes out of this. So yeah, so like I said, we have all of our speakers here today. So we're gonna get started. So our first, but before we get started with our speakers, so again, going over a brief overview of Empower DC. We started in 2003. You know, I know some of you all may already be familiar with Empower DC, but if not, here's me a quick refresher. You know, we're focusing on really uplifting community members and really building collective power as it relates to self-advocacy and when addressing systemic change within our DC area, you know, really advocating for, you know, better development, equitable development, you know, as it relates to, you know, public housing and environmental justice, and really addressing racial equity within our district. You know, through a lot of different ways, you know, either it be through policy, you know, or, you know, educating the community and whatnot. So, you know, we've really been active So a lot of our work, kind of breaking it down a little bit further. So when we think about equitable development, looking at public affordable housing within our district, making sure that people can, actually live in this expensive city, but making sure, we are preparing for the future, within looking at comprehensive plans and making sure that we're really addressing some of our zoning issues as it relates to environmental justice, but also looking at, how our district is using our land, looking at kind of specific community development. So we've been working in Ivy City for our entirety of existence, for the most part, and there's really a prime example of how all of those things kind of come together within our fight with getting the Carmel School. So that's definitely something we could talk further about. But also, within looking at in our environmental justice work, like I said before, we do a lot of work in Ivy City, addressing the heat island effect and some toxic polluters that are in the community, but also doing similar work in Brentwood, addressing, some of our, more major polluters and kind of just the history of how industrial land is being used within our city. We also spearhead our DC Environmental Justice Coalition. So if you are, here representing a organization, or if you know of any organizations that are interested in environmental justice work, please contact us. We would love to have you a part of our coalition. We have a few of our coalition members actually here today. And, we definitely, want to continue to have that collaborative work. And then also lastly, looking at racial equity and reaching, more racial equity within our district. So yeah, like I said, we're going to get started. I'm going to stop sharing my screen for just a moment. Our first presenter is going to be Queen McKnight from Queen's Energy, LLC. So if you have your presentation, let me see if you have sharing capabilities. I'm gonna give you the sharing. But before she gets started, I'm gonna definitely introduce you. Go ahead, Queen.
Yes, I was actually I was not doing a presentation. I was actually
Okay.
to speak with everyone and have an open conversation with everyone that's here today.
All right, that sounds good. Okay, that's fine. Let me introduce you then, and then we can get started. Um, Sorry, just trying to leave. Okay. So, like I said before, we have Queen McKnight. She is a trailblazer figure in the construction industry. She is committed to promoting sustainability, and is the founder of Queen's Energy Conservation LLC, a vertically integrated firm that provides turnkey solutions for general contracting, construction management, and innovative energy efficiency services to residential, commercial, and government clients. Queen is a tireless advocate for uplifting women in the male-dominated field and supporting people in the industry globally. Queen's dedication extends beyond construction. She is a champion in STEM education through hands-on projects and promoting energy conservation. So everyone, can we please welcome Queen McKnight as she leads us in a brief conversation.
All right, all right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Miss Queen McKnight. Thank you so much, Anthony, for a wonderful introduction. I thank everyone for joining us this morning as we talk about resiliency and ways to improve our community and reduce our carbon footprint as members of the community. So I did just I do not have a presentation. I wanted to kind of have an open conversation to ensure that, any questions that you all may have about ways to cut down your bills, right? So what are some ways that you can cut down your bills in your specific situations? So I like to open the floor and kind of work with everyone that's, that's in in here today to answer your questions directly in case you have something direct, rather than present with what you could do and it's not necessarily what you may need to do. So consider it a consultation, if you say. But there are several ways that residents can reduce their carbon footprint. There are a lot of smaller things that we can do, like, for instance, not leave our car running while we're sitting outside drinking our coffee before we go into work in the mornings. There are some things that we can do as far as we teach our children if we have them. Don't leave the water running. Make sure you turn off the lights. Things like that are major. They're small, but they make major, major improvements for the community when it comes to resiliency. Now, as far as if you have a home, there are a multitude of things that you can do to not only reduce your energy utilization, but also cut down the cost on your bills. I'm sure that we've heard of the various forms of renewable energy. For instance, we have photovoltaics, which is solar panels. You put them up on your roof and you're able to utilize the energy from the sun rather than from the grid, which in turn improves the amount of energy that is being utilized off the grid. There are other ways that you are able to reduce it as well. But I'm going to talk a little bit about the solar and electrical carbon footprint reduction for homeowners. So if you have a home and you get solar installed in your home, as I mentioned, it reduces what's put back on the grid, but you also are able to utilize that energy within your home. And there are ways that you can now also place that energy back into the grid and make some additional funds for your pocket. I'm sorry here, I'm looking through my notes. You can actually have some efficient lighting within your home to reduce the amount of energy that's being utilized as well. So rather than the incandescents, have some LED lighting. You can also, utilize power strips within your home to utilizing power strips actually actually helps with control of the equipment that you may have plugged into that power strip, that power source. So there are various forms of power strips available, but they have some with internal switching mechanisms to now monitor if you're actually using that piece of equipment or not, and it will in turn turn it off for you instead of you now having to remember to turn off that equipment. That's very, very important to make sure we turning off things that we aren't using, that aren't being used. And another thing that's very important is controlling the amount of, air and or heat that you're using in the home. So it's recommended, believe it or not, that our thermostats are set in the summer times to 78 degrees throughout the summer, no matter what the temperatures is outside, and it will aid in cutting the amount of energy that you're utilizing and putting on the grid. Also in the winter, it's recommended to have your thermostats set to 68 degrees Fahrenheit to do the same, to have that same outcome. So that's important to keep in mind as well. Does anyone have any questions with anything that I've said thus far, or any comments or anything?
I have a comment.
Sure, yes.
Hey, Angel's Boy, Master Electrician, Titan Power. Hi, Queen. My question, and this actually goes back to the home, and maybe you've encountered this, is when people decide to upgrade their electrical panels in their homes, and a lot of people assume they have to upgrade to the 200 amp panel, but because of, if you make those small improvements that you said, you can keep your current panel, like if it's at 125 amps or 150 amps, and make changes that way. Can you speak about that?
Sure. So I'm going to address Mrs. Savoy, and then I see another hand raised. So yes, definitely. If it's assumed that everyone needs 200 amps to successfully power their home, which ultimately you're putting more energy back onto the grid that way. So definitely. If you are able to cut down on the energy utilization within the home, so upgrading your equipment throughout the home and system. So your stove, your refrigeration system, and look for Energy Star equipment where now it's going to utilize less amperage. So amperage is actually what the equipment is using to work. Now, with that, if you cut down on your amperage, then you're able to sustain possibly with the amount of power that's being distributed to the home without upgrading what you're putting on the grid to now be able to run the equipment or and what you have in the home. So with what she said is important. If you are thinking about getting a panel upgrade or bringing more power into your home, it's a great idea to get that energy audit. Even as a homeowner, get that energy audit so you can now ensure that you're not driving your monthly bills up because you're pulling in all of this energy that's not being used throughout the home. So that was a very good point. Mrs. Savoy, do you have any other questions around that or any other comments? All right. I do see Lewis, Tanae Lewis, I'm sorry if I mispronounced your name, has a hand raised. Did you have a comment or a question?
I do have a question. When you mentioned to set your thermostat at 78 degrees in the summertime, it helps with energy costs. What recommendations do you have to ensure that air quality in the home is good as well? Because on these days that it's been really hot, I would love to set it at 78, but it gets really humid and at the top of the house. So do you have any recommendations on how to improve the air quality? Because I definitely want to cut down costs, energy use costs, but don't want to increase my hospitalization costs either.
I completely understand that. So yes, definitely you need to basically to drive down humidity, you should create a flow of moving the air throughout the home. Now, there are various ways that you can do that. One of the simplest ways is to install some ceiling fans and install some ceiling fans at the upper levels of your home and run those and it will help circulate that air. So essentially circulating the air helps, but also putting in a dehumidifier. So you can actually get those from local stores like Walmart, Target, places like that, and put in a dehumidifier, and that will also aid in that. I suggest putting it upstairs and maybe even in the hallway, so now it can take care of the entirety of the upstairs and help and aid in that circulation and movement with the air.
Great, thank you. Thank you.
We probably have time for about one or two more questions.
All right. I believe there's some in the chat. Mr. David, are you able to, all right, I'm gonna try to pull it up here. I have to scroll.
I have it here. I can read it, or David, if you want to come off mute and ask it.
I was just curious to know, sometimes people might not be able to get solar panels on their roof, but maybe they could signal to their energy utility, hey, can you provide me wind or solar power? Do I have that option? And so I was just curious to know what is the policy in the district about that, and if you have any insights if I want to purchase alternative energy.
Definitely. Great question. Thank you. So believe it or not, there are various programs within the district to help homeowners, conserve energy. There are. One of our major partners with Queens Energy Conservation is the District of Columbia's Sustainable Energy Utility. So that is DCSEU. They are phenomenal in aiding not only residents, but businesses as well with reducing their carbon footprint. So I'm sorry, let me see here. I wanted to read your question out. Financial assistance, tell me what part. Yes. So DCSEU does also offer financial assistance as long as you meet their funding requirements, then they do offer financial assistance, but it's great to have companies now that are partnered with the organization. So I will definitely be putting my information in the chat here before the program is over, and anyone can reach out to me for more information on that. But you actually get rebates on full system replacements, your HVAC systems, small appliances, like if you need a refrigerator or a stove. So yes, there are various ways to save money as we also reduce our carbon footprint. Thank you.
Very
Thank
cool.
you. Were there any more questions, Anthony? I'm sorry, I didn't want to leave anyone.
There's one more from Dennis Chestnut. He asks, who provides the energy audits?
Okay. Well, Queens Energy Conservation is a certified business with the district. There is a website, a CBE website, where you can check the certified companies throughout the district for various of your needs. But we do offer energy audits with Queens Energy Conservation, and I will also leave that link in the chat as well. So now everyone on this line has access to find out which companies are not only verified, but certified with the district. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Queen. Can we give Queen a round of applause virtually? I don't know how the best way to do that. But yes, thank you so much. This is definitely super insightful. You know, I think you definitely have a lot to offer, and I definitely really do appreciate you being on this call today and just learning more about everything that you have at Queen's Energy. And like I said before, we will definitely have another round of Q&A towards the end of the presentation. So if you have any more questions for Queen, you can either hold on to it or drop it in the chat, and we can be able to circle back to it. And yeah, and like she said, she'll also drop her information for you all to contact her. So now we're going to introduce our next panelist, which is Dennis Chestnut. Mr. Chestnut, could you share your presentation? I can give you sharing on your end, or if you could resend it to me, I can share it on my end. Either works.
Okay. Yeah, I sent that, but let me see if I can send it again to you just quickly.
Okay, well, while you do that, I'll introduce you real quick.
Okay.
So Mr. Chestnut is a proud native Washingtonian. He is a master carpenter and a vocational educator, but his dedication to youth development, community improvement, and civic duty has led to his involvement with many civic and conservation projects. He has a passion for conservation and the environment and has advised many community, business, and government leaders on civic ecology practices and civic engagement issues. Dennis is the board chair of the Ward 7 Resilience Hub Community Coalition and has created and helped establish many community serving and youth serving organizations over the years, including the nationally acclaimed Eastern Branch Striders Track and Field Club and Groundwork Anacostia River, DC. So can we give another round of applause for Mr. Chestnut? And just give us one moment while we get his presentation up.
Yeah. All right. Well, while you're pulling that up, I'd like to say good morning to everyone, and it's great to be a part of this, and also congratulations on the good work that Empower DC continues to do in forming and educating the community around these special needs. And whenever you're ready, I'll move forward. But a little bit about the Ward 7 Resilience Hub Community Coalition. We're a relatively young organization, just a few years old. We actually started our process as a community working group back in 2017. And we came together primarily around some challenges that our community in far Northeast Ward 7 faces as it relates to some of the climate change challenges and some other what we call disruptions that face our community. One that is a major priority for us right now is flood risk. I'm not sure how many people are familiar with the far northeast area near Minnesota Avenue, Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue, 295, that part of the city. We have a couple of natural resources that really adds to why we're facing some of these challenges, and that is the Anacostia River is runs the longest stretch of the Anacostia River runs through far northeast Ward 7. And the largest tributary or stream that feeds into the Anacostia River also, which is Watts Branch, also is located in this community. So those two natural resources, which we are very grateful for having an abundance of natural resources and green space in this community, but they have led to some of the challenges that we have with flooding here in the district. So I will also say that Washington, D.C., as many of you know, was built on primarily swampland many years ago, centuries ago. And this area of the city where we live is located within what is called a floodplain. Now, Washington, D.C., there are other parts of the city located within the floodplain, which is identified by how frequent certain level storms occur. So there's a 100-year floodplain, a 500-year floodplain that the District Department of Environment has identified those areas, by way of flood map. So I would recommend anyone actually to go to the Department of Energy and Environment's website, and an abundance of information is located there regarding that. But this area of the city, when we look at the totality of Washington, D.C., which is located within the floodplain, there's some areas in like Ward 6, for example, especially in the southwest part of Ward 6. There's some areas of Ward 8, because Ward 8 is our cousin right next door to Ward 7, and also has portions of the Anacostia River located there. And this part of the city, and I will finish this part of the discussion on this. 75 to 80% of the properties, and especially residential properties located within the 100 and 500-year floodplains, are located in far northeast Ward 7. So that gives you an indication of why flood risk is a high priority and is at the top of our agenda as far as getting the community informed, educated, but also prepared, so that in the event of these kinds of occurrences, the community is prepared to be able to respond and adapt to these challenges, but then also for us to be able to respond and come back, hopefully better than the situations existed before these kinds of occurrences took place. So were you able to get that loaded? If not, I can continue to talk and do like my great colleague Queen, who gave such a great presentation and having a conversation. And sometimes, it's even better to have these kind of conversations. So I did provide some information, and I'll just state these right now, but I'll also try to put these in the chat. Um, the District of Columbia has done a great job of at least bringing some of these things into the administrative side of things, and that's very good. We have some agencies like, as I said, the Department of Energy, DC's Department of Energy and Environment. We also have another agency that I really will direct everyone to, and that is the DC Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. They do quite a few things and have quite a bit of information, and I really recommend that folks go to their website and check out what they offer. Um, the Department of Homeland Security and Emergency Management also has alerts that I also recommend that residents sign up for that app. And it will keep you informed of things that happen on a regular basis. For example, if there is flooding that takes place, or if there's a heat alert, which we've experienced recently, some very extensive heat challenges here in the city. Those alerts, if you have those alerts, those apps loaded on your cell phones or on your computers, you will be notified of what those are, and also it gives great information as to what you can do. For example, just to mention the heat, it will identify where cooling centers are located. And this will, help to provide the residents who need to find places to be able to come in out of the heat and, not be exposed, which heat is a very serious, dangerous health. It can have some health effects and health challenges to the community. So let's see, I'm trying to see if I can load my screen, but to keep from disrupting the presentation, I'll just continue to talk and share this. So one of the other things that, one of the reasons that we face flooding challenges, some of you may have been familiar with some of the flooding incidents. One that is probably very, or the most recent that a lot of people are familiar with, is the flood events that took place over in the Rhode Island Avenue area, and of course the animal clinic, the animal hospital that flooded, and a number of dogs died in that flood. That became, very apparent to a lot of folks how serious the flooding issues can be. So just to give you an example, there are a few different kinds. Somebody might say, wow, that part of the city is not located anywhere near the Anacostia River or any major waterway or tributary. But one of the challenges that we have here in the city is the built infrastructure. And when we have extreme weather events that bring extensive amounts of rainfall, if that storm water doesn't have anywhere to go and doesn't drain as quickly, it's going to back up and flooding will occur. And that was the case with the animal hospital that was located on Rhode Island Avenue. I understand that they're not open any longer in that location, but that was a classic example of how quickly a flood can occur and how much actual damage it can have. But I'd like to focus on the residential kinds of flooding, and that's one of the things that the Resilience Hub Community Coalition, along with a couple of community partners, one being Nature Forward, formerly the Audubon Society, the Green Scheme, which is a youth-serving nonprofit organization that works east of the river in Ward 7 and 8, and the Washington Interfaith Network. We joined together on a partnership to create some workshops. We call them Floodwise Rise Above workshops for the community here in far northeast Ward 7. And we conducted those workshops starting this past April, a series of 3 workshops, one informing and educating the community about the various types of flooding and what flooding is, how it occurs. The second workshop was what you can do to adapt and prepare yourself in the event of those floods. And then the third workshop was we found was very informative, and a lot of people had no idea about this particular part of it, but that is the flood insurance. And what we found out was that a lot of people think they have flood insurance because they have property insurance. But property insurance and flood insurance are 2 different things totally. And
Hey Dennis, sorry
yes,
to interrupt, but you have about a minute left.
okay,
So could you finish this thought, but have any final words that you may have as well?
sure. And so I'll just finish up with that. We did 2 presentations of this particular series of workshops, and we came away with great results. The participation was great, and people learned a lot. And we intend to continue to conduct those going forward for the community. So again, the Resilience Hub Community Coalition, we're located in far northeast Ward 7. Our office is at the Marshall Heights Community Development Organization building. But we also have developed the first pilot resilience hub at the Fontroy Community Enrichment Center on Nanny Helen Burroughs Avenue. So I will put additional contact information in the chat so that anyone who has any further questions can feel free to reach out to us, and we'll be glad to answer your questions and hopefully be able to work with you to make your challenges a little less challenging. So if anyone has any questions, feel free at this time to ask those. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Chestnut. Can we give him a round of applause virtually again? Yes, thank you so much. So yeah, like he said, he'll put some information in the chat. And again, we will have more time for questions and conversations later. So let's move on to our next presenter. We have Mr. Andrea from the Department of Energy and Environment. Yeah, I made you co-host so you could share your presentation. So let me know if you're able to do that. But before you get started, I'd like to introduce him again. So he is a city planner and flood resilience expert at the District Department of Energy and Environment's flood team. With almost 20 years of local government experience and community planning in Washington, D.C. and Baltimore, Maryland, Andrea has led planning projects in community sustainability, climate resilience, housing, economic development, industrial transformation, and public art. Andrea's work for DOEE's flood team focuses on adopting a planning approach and an equity lens to flood resilience that prioritize vulnerable populations and creates community-based strategies that leverage nature-based solutions to improve neighbors at risk. So let's give it up one more time for Andrea.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. Oof. Okay. Good morning, everybody. Anthony, thank you so much for putting this together and inviting me to speak. And thank you, everybody, for setting aside your time on Saturday morning for climate and climate action. So Anthony asked me to do a presentation about, I think it was about climate action. So what I decided to do, so again, I work at DOE and I work on our small flood team. And I bring to the flood team 15 years of local district experience as a city planner. So what I try to do is create local strategies for flood resilience. And so what I wanted to do with my presentation, given my long experience with district government, was to try to explain to people how things happen on the ground, but starting from really kind of a view from very up high above. And the idea is that I want to show you how our citywide plans get transformed into action at the local level. So this is a view of the many, many plans that we have in the district for sustainability and climate. Starting basically 10 years ago, the district started getting really serious and very organized about making the district the most sustainable city in the US. That was the promise of Sustainable DC back in 2013. And since then, we have basically created a citywide plan for everything, for climate resilience, for making our an energy switch to clean energy. Again, another climate resilience plan. We actually have two in the district. And then updating our sustainability plan every few years just to introduce new ideas. And then you see there, Keep Cool DC. That's our plan, citywide plan to keep the city cooler as temperatures keep going up. And et cetera, we get to the end where the latest plan is the one to make the city a zero waste city. But how do these plans then become action on the ground that you might see in your neighborhood? So since we don't have all day, and this is a lot of plans, I'm only going to focus on the climate plans, basically the plans that we have to make our city more resilient to climate change. Why do we need that? As you hopefully know, climate change is already here anyway. It's not something we have to look at the future for anymore. It's here. We keep on getting every year. Apparently is the new hottest year on record. We have flash floods in the district. I would say at least 6 times a year. We suffer flash floods kind of in different neighborhoods everywhere. Like Dennis Chestnuts reminded us just last August, we got flooded on Rhode Island Avenue, and that was the second August in a row where we got flooded right there. And it doesn't help that the district is actually subsiding, which means we actually going down closer to sea level. And then, of course, we have sea level rise. So our likelihood to experience flooding in the city just keeps on getting greater and greater. Again, our temperatures keep on increasing. These are just graphics to show you that these things are real, and into the future, sea level rise keeps on going up. So let me give you a very quick overview of our climate plans, our citywide climate plans. So the first one was in 2016. Climate Ready DC. As you can see, this was like an early attempt for us to start to prioritize areas in the district according to what we understood to be the areas with the highest risk. So what you see here in this map, for instance, you see Watts Branch, which is an area that Dennis Chestnut just talked about. That's been an area of interest for us basically since 2016, if not earlier. And then you can see, for instance, Southwest, that's also an area that back then we understood to be at high risk of flooding. So what I want to do is just focus on how these plans have worked out for Southwest and Buzzard Point as an example. But as you can see, other areas have also been identified. So again, Watts Branch, areas close here to Ivy City. But talking about just Southwest and Buzzard Point, this is the first time where the district says, okay, this is an area where we need more studying. And basically every plan since then, we kept on saying the same thing. So like couple of years later, our second resilience plan, we did the same thing. But here, the good thing is we finally set aside through this plan, the citywide plan, $500,000 of local funding to study this issue of potential flooding in southwestern Buzzard Point. I just want to show you recently, last year, I actually led this plan. This might be of interest to a few of you. We looked at all the communities in floodplains in the District of Columbia. And we started asking ourselves, how do we prioritize work, the limited funding we have, the limited capacity that we have over so many communities? There's like 20 different communities in floodplains. How do we do that? If all floodplains are the same and everybody's in the 100-year floodplain, how do you prioritize one over the other? So we did this citywide analysis where we looked at the areas most at risk, also considering sea level rise and climate projections. And then we looked at where our most vulnerable populations live. And then we overlaid this tool and we created this new ranking that we're now using for looking for federal funding, but also prioritizing our work. And now we know, which we knew before, but we have data to back this up, that Southwest and Buzzard Point, Oxon Run, and Watts Branch are the district priorities. And that's important for us because a lot of flood resilience work in the US is usually done by federal agencies. And so for a long time, a lot of resources have been spent over hardening the protection around the National Mall for obvious reasons. But you know, as the District of Columbia, we obviously want to prioritize people. And so this is where we understand our highest priorities to be. So again, that brings us back again to Southwest and Buzzard Point. So we have all these citywide plans telling us Southwest and Buzzard Point. So how do we go to like community, to the community and act on that? So in 2015, this is the first time that we started looking at this floodplain. And, you know, with Buzzard Point, if most of you, not obviously, I'm assuming most of you are from the District of Columbia, you know, Buzzard Point just 5-6 years ago was an industrial area. So 2017, there was a plan that set the parcels for transforming that area into a mixed community. And this is where the district set new standards for development for this area, knowing that this area was at risk of flooding. In this plan that set the development for Buzzard Point, this is the first time that the district suggests the new buildings should be set to a 500-year storm standard instead of a 100-year storm standard, so that buildings there have a higher protection. And we will see that that was actually a really good choice. Then we kept on meeting with the base there, Fort McNair. The District of Columbia has a lot of bases along its waterfront. So part of our duty to protect our communities is also to work with bases and the federal government, because it's hard for us to protect, for instance, the public housing in Southwest and Buzzard Point if we get a storm coming up the Potomac River, if the base is not protected. So essentially, we need the base to protect itself for us to be able to protect the community behind it. So we do a lot of work with bases. And then, of course, we have to look at our shoreline. How can we affect it? How can we make it so that if we do get a storm, the communities behind our shorelines are protected? So again, we studied what we call a livable shoreline in Buzzard Point. That basically means using nature-based design and solutions. So using nature, using trees, using plants, using soil to protect the community behind it, instead of creating, say, a 12-foot wall that would block people from enjoying the sea and would have absolutely no value when it comes to sustainability. In 2022, the Army Corps of Engineers studied Buzzer Point in terms of risk from storm surge at sea, and basically found that all the risk is on base because their buildings are old and they're all kind of built to standards that we wouldn't build things at today, especially in a floodplain. Whereas the newer side of Buzzer Point, the one that's been developed in the last 6 years, they found that pretty much none of the new buildings is at risk, because we made that decision of asking developers to build at a higher standard, which, by the way, that has become is about to become the citywide standard for new buildings, because it worked in Buzzer Point. So that's just to show you how all these decisions then work towards creating more resilient communities. And I'm going to get to the last plan that we did. So all these decisions, all this understanding of risk finally led us to spend that $500,000 that the second citywide climate plan set for us in Southwest. And that's when we hired Rumble and some other consultants who helped us work with the community there to create a resilient strategy. And this is the first time that the district has created and worked with the community to create a flood resilience strategy at the community level. And what we did here is we decided to use nature-based solutions and create essentially a grid. If you look here at the image on the right, it's essentially a grid of green infrastructure, so that as one piece of this, say a park, gets to capacity, there's another piece of infrastructure down the road that we can purposely flood. So this is the idea that if we use our roadways, for instance, better, we make them greener, we create more space for green infrastructure, then we can have roadways that don't flood, only flood minimally. For instance, in this case, only in the parking area. And same for parks. We can design parks that can flood purposely when we need them to, so that houses don't flood. And then the idea is that you connect these projects on roadways and in parks and create this network that protects the entire community. And that's what we try to do in Southwest. And so this is where the implementation comes in. So we looked at citywide plans, then we looked at a local plan, and now this is the implementation. And so basically right now in Southwest, we have funding, which is partly federal and partly local, to redesign 3 parks to purposely flood if we have a major flood and we need that stormwater to go somewhere. We also have funding to study the redesign of 2nd Street Southwest, again, to make the street so that there's areas of the street that can flood and contain some of that stormwater. And now we have funding also to study that living shoreline around Buzzer Point. These are just some of the concept designs for Landsberg Park, which is the biggest park in Southwest that we're going to be affecting. And we work with the community there to design this space, essentially, that you see are ponding into this beautiful park. There's a trail that people can just meander through nature. And this project was possible thanks to a $80 million award from FEMA that we got because of all those plans. And again, that funding is going to affect also our ability to redesign these old baseball diamond and basketball courts in Greenleaf so that they can purposely flood. And so just that everybody knows, there's a lot of public housing right here all around these facilities. So in Southwest, our main goal is to really protect the public housing. We have 3 very large communities all in the floodplain. This is again one of the parks. This is the street. I just don't want to take too much time, but I can go back if anybody has any questions.
Thank you so much, Andrea. Can we give him a round of applause?
That was a lot of information, but
Yeah. But yeah, like we said, we will definitely have more time for questions towards the end. We have our final presentation next. Um, so thank you, Andrea. So we're going to move on to Mr. David Herring. I will share your presentation, and yeah, but before I do that, I'd like to introduce him. So Mr. David Herring is an award-winning science communicator with over 30 years of experience working with the earth science communities of NASA and NOAA. David currently serves as the Chief of Communication Division with NOAA's Climate Program Office based in Silver Spring, Maryland, where he oversees NOAA's climate.org, .gov, excuse me, and the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit websites. David also co-chairs the U.S. Global Change Research Program's Federal Adaptation and Resilience Group, and he is an elected fellow of the American Association of the Advancement of Science. He received a master's degree in science and technical communications from East Carolina University in 1992. So everyone, please welcome David, and I'll pull up his presentation.
Thanks, Anthony. Appreciate that introduction. I like to say that I've been in communications for over 30 years, and I'm finally starting to learn how to do it. So you guys will have to be patient with me. I'm trained as a science communicator. I've had the privilege of standing on the shoulders of giants in NASA and NOAA for over 30 years. So, some of their knowledge has really rubbed off on me. I really enjoy communicating and storytelling and visualizing data. Anthony invited me here to take a minute to just give an overview of the Climate Program Office. We're situated in Silver Spring, so we're inside the Beltway, just right outside the boundary of DC. But it's a pleasure to be with you guys. My contact information is there. I'm really excited about some of the work that you all are doing, and if there's ever opportunity for us to reconnect or I can be of service to you all, please do not hesitate in reaching out. And Anthony, I'll just move quickly through a few slides to give you a feel for the scope of our work. And then if there's ways that it can be of service, let me know. So just at a high level, we are an agency that's tasked with advancing scientific understanding of the planet and sharing that knowledge freely with the public. Often with climate messaging, sometimes there can be a tendency to get into sort of the overwhelming doom and gloom. And we've really chosen to focus on that brighter future that we envision, where all peoples, all economies, environments are resilient to climate impacts, and that we're working together to mitigate climate change and to prepare the way for that brighter future. And that everyone belongs, everyone is included and benefits from the opportunities and the solutions of the actions we take. Next slide. As I mentioned, we send instruments and women and men to the ends of the earth to understand how the system works. From the surface of the sun to the bottom of the ocean, we deployed instruments that make observations and collect data. We like to try to get at the roots of predictability in the system. So if we understood this better, then how could we feed that knowledge into computer models and the data that we systematically, routinely collect all over the planet into predictive models from hours to decades out into the future. And so we feed that knowledge, we share it freely with the public, but we also feed it into and we fund some of the best and brightest researchers in universities and research labs all around the country to work on turning that data and information into knowledge and into actionable intelligence, and then flowing that out in ways to advance education, to advance understanding, and ultimately to help support and underpin a lot of the types of planning work that that Dennis and Queen and Andrea were talking about. So it's super exciting to see the work that they are all doing. Next slide. So as I said, we invest in research to advance understanding, but then we also, through our own networks, extension networks, and through partnerships of all kinds, we work shoulder to shoulder with people in every sector, in every region of the nation to really get inside problem sets and then understand how to leverage and use that information for planning, for adaptation and resilience building and mitigation. So here you see one of our extension agents in the bottom. This was a drawing from an actual photograph working with a restaurant owner in Panini Bay restaurant in New Jersey after Superstorm Sandy. And what she's showing him is what the projections show 20 years into the future. So he elevated his restaurant by 13 feet. But what he was just discovering and coming to grips with is that 20 years from now, while his restaurant may be high and dry, the roads that people are going to need to drive on are most likely to be underwater. And so you have to think about the direct and the indirect impacts to what is important for the viability of a community. Next slide. We also invest in engaging with educators and students to try to get into the STEM development pipeline to make sure that we're producing climate literate graduates, people who understand the values and the importance of sustainability. And we have recently received through the Inflation Reduction Act funds funding to develop training and professional development resources to build what we call a climate ready workforce, because we have a climate ready nation mission is to help the nation plan and prepare and adapt for to the impacts of global warming and climate change. And front and center with that training and professional development is equity and inclusivity and belonging. The next slide is just there's a website. Anthony mentioned this in his intro. So my team hosts and manages climate.gov. The name is the web address, climate.gov. And you can think of it as a popular science magazine about climate science. So we put a lot of elbow grease into writing in ways that are plain language to make it understandable. And we try to work in ways that are visually attractive. So we do a lot of mapping and data visualization, and everyone is encouraged to take and use visuals from our site in your own communications, in your own plans or reports, or however is useful to you. And we have blogs, we have articles and so forth. So we really try to treat climate.gov as an engaging platform. And there's a lot of associated social media with that. We're very engaging on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, for example. Next slide. On climate.gov, we have a global climate dashboard. This is a data-driven readout on the state of the global climate system. And so you can see these spark lines, these trend lines that are shown, like, well, what's happening with the greenhouse gases in the atmosphere? What's happening with sea level or with the heat content of the ocean and so forth? And then you can click on any of those and it takes you sort of progressively deeper and deeper into the information. So if you go one slide further, for example, the next click, if you click on the annual greenhouse gas index, what that's showing you, for example, is the warming influence combined of all the heat trapping gases that humans have put into the atmosphere. And so what that's showing you, that little infographic on the right, is that since the year 1990, humans have increased the heat trapping capacity of the atmosphere by 49%, which is staggering when you think that's only a 30-year span of time. And so, and then it shows you that carbon dioxide is responsible for it's more powerful than all the other human emitted greenhouse gases combined. It's about 2/3 of the warming influence. And so it's a way to begin to contextualize the science information, but bring it down that people can take it and use it in their own communications, or you can keep going deeper if you want to find your way all the way to the data or read and learn more. The next slide is we developed an offshoot from climate.gov called the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit. This was explicitly called for by President Obama during his administration in his executive order for the federal government to help the nation prepare for the effects of climate change. He explicitly called for, and ultimately the White House turned to NOAA, and NOAA turned to my team and me, and we stood up the U.S. Climate Resilience Toolkit at the address that's given here. And so since that time, we've been working with communities. Next slide. We have a framework that's shown on the left. It's called the Steps to Resilience Framework. And it's basically the backbone. The toolkit itself is a portal where we make discoverable all the freely available resources from all across the federal family that people can take and use, who are grappling with a whole range of issues, ranging from energy infrastructure to human health to built environments to food and agriculture, you name it. And then we have that framework, and we have been working shoulder to shoulder with local government entities to help them make and implement resilience plans. And then we were also asked to develop a tool called the Climate Explorer. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you. I went ahead and loaded up in the next one. It shows you, I typed in Washington, D.C. We're offering downscaled climate projections from the model outputs for every county in the U.S. and the District of Columbia. So in this case, if you go one more slide, you'll see, for example, I selected the variable, the number of days above 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And so just to orient you for a moment to this chart, what you can see sort of towards the bottom left, that gray band going back to 1950 shows you what has been climate normal in the 20th century, where in the DC area, we all were experiencing a little over 4 days per year where temperatures exceeded 95 degrees Fahrenheit. And then going out to the right, you can see out to the year 2100 what the models project, and that it could be as many as 80 days per year. So a 20-fold increase. Can you imagine 80 days out of the year where temperatures go above 95 degrees Fahrenheit? So a lot of the work and the actions that Andrea and Queen and Dennis and others are taking there to green your landscape, to brighten the landscape, and to do other things are building resilience against that exposure to extreme heat that could plausibly occur this century. And so we develop tools like this so that they can use the science integral with their planning processes. Next slide. I just wanted to say that we're also now thinking in terms of ways to scale up and accelerate. So my team and I are working on what we call a climate resilience information system, where we're building better bridges into the data and information that we produce so that people like Andrea and Dennis and Queen and others can easily get it and incorporate it into their planning. We are recruiting and training a cohort of practitioners that we're going to fund and deploy in communities all around the country to work shoulder to shoulder with them to plan so that we can scale up and accelerate the pace of adaptation. And then we're going to continue to operate tools like the Climate Resilience Toolkit so that we can gather and share that knowledge. As Andrea and Dennis and Queen are having success, what lessons are they learning, right? And how can we share their wisdom with others who are just getting started on that journey? And so we want to turn this into an all-way knowledge sharing enterprise. And so we think of this as an ecosystem of practitioners, and what can we do to be that connective tissue? So just a few other slides, to show some of what might be specifically relevant to DC. The next slide, we stood up a new web portal called heat.gov. And some of you may be familiar with, and it's available online at heat.gov. And if you go one more slide, you may be familiar with, I worked with some colleagues to fund and conceive and launch a national urban heat island mapping campaign. And we did one in Washington, D.C. back in 2018, where we had volunteers driving around the city with these devices that they rolled up into their car windows. And together, volunteer residents mapped the hottest places in DC on one of the hottest days of summer in 2018. And so we produced this map that was published in climate.gov. And what you can see in this map is that some parts of the city were as much as about 17 degrees hotter at exactly the same time of day on the same day than other parts of the city, just as a function of what the land cover was like. So you can see that it's not equitable, the exposure to extreme conditions. They were talking about flood risk and heat risk. And what you can see is that it's not uniformly spread across the landscape. And so that is a tool that we shared with the DC government to help them begin to see and understand where communities may be at risk and where they may need to be formulating plans for protecting people. The next slide shows you that we're doing this all across the country, on the order of 10 or 20 every year. We're working with cities all across the country, and now other cities in other parts of the world as well who have heard about this program and are saying, hey, can we do this in Brazil? Can we do this in Africa? And so forth. Next slide is just showing you that the National Integrated Heat Health Information System has other companion programs in addition to urban heat island mapping. We're doing heat tabletop exercises where we're working with locals to help them sort of work through scenario planning and kind of a gamified dialogue situation to help them understand their exposure to heat and what are strategies and options for protecting people. I don't have a slide for it, but the last thing I'll mention, we're also now talking with an entity based in Virginia called Wetlands Watch, to create kind of an analog to urban heat island mapping. And in Wetlands Watch, think of another volunteer program where you have your smartphone and you can walk the contours of high water marks and help us map flooding and flood risk. And so the idea is going to be, in addition to continuing to work with and empower citizens to get involved in science and to feel ownership of the gathering of information and the conversation that ensues, is to also involve citizens to help us understand and map flood risk at very high resolution. So this would be another thing that's coming that we would also love to work with you all in Washington. So I'll put a pin in it there, but I'm happy to answer any questions or talk about any of this in more depth. Thank you, Anthony.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Herring. Can we give him a round of applause? Yes, very, very good. And I guess a round of applause for all of the presenters today as well. You all did an amazing job. I definitely learned a lot, and I'm definitely super happy and glad that you all came today. Parisa.
Yeah, thanks to all of our presenters. Really appreciate it. I wanted to ask a question if I could, which is, so many of these things that we're talking about have a connection to land use, of course, right? At the end of the day, a lot of the land uses that we have chosen are leading to some of the conditions that we experience, whether flooding and concentration of industrial sites or other things that are contributing to heat, air pollution. And so I'm one thing that I keep struggling with is how are we actually changing land uses as we evolve our understanding of these issues and how they're impacting people. And I say this because we're trying to get into the decision making at all levels, planning, zoning, development, all of these things. And there's a real resistance when we start really talking about land use changes. So I just wanted to raise it. I don't know if it's something that others have like any kind of response to or not, but I wanted to raise it because, we will be coming up on the comprehensive plan again, which is the 20-year plan for development. One of the things most critical in the comp plan is the maps, the future land use map in particular, which helps to define what type of structures, height, size, and use can be built on certain pieces of land. And those decisions impact these other things that we're talking about. And I'll just say briefly, Ivy City Small Area Plan is out for comment right now, and we're very concerned. Even though we were involved along the way, it really is not reflecting what the community was saying, the priorities of the community. It's actually really pushing for this dense development on New York Avenue that will, not only contribute, as far as I can tell, to the heat and other issues, but also displace people. And obviously, and I'll stop, but obviously we don't want to just improve the environment for some new wealthier residents who come in. We want to improve the conditions for the people who've been here all along. So just wanted to see if you've thought about how the land use decision making arenas interplay with the work that you all are doing.
This is Dennis, and I'll just take a little short stab at that. Land use decisions have impacts very far into the future. And I'll just give one quick example. Everyone, most of us here are familiar with the 295 corridor that comes in from the Baltimore-Washington Parkway and goes south, all the way through wards 7 and 8 and borders 5 and 6. And that highway system wiped out a community when it was constructed back in the 1950s. It was determined to be an improvement for transportation and those kinds of things. But it exacerbated all kinds of challenges and problems. One of the things it created for the communities where it runs through was it was one of the major contributors to the flooding that eventually took place in the Deanwood, Hillbrook, Parkside, Kenilworth. Those communities wound up becoming a flood risk. So that decision way back in the 1950s, we're still working to try to get out, improve the situation for that community. And now they're even talking about taking that highway system, burying it underground, and trying to restore those communities that were negatively impacted. That's a classic example of an environmental injustice, or what they call environmental justice, but I call it environmental injustice situation.
Thank you so much. Or go ahead,
Andrea,
Parisha.
Andrea, were about to add anything? Or
Yeah, I mean, I guess I should. Since I worked at the Office of Planning for 13 years, and so I think I understand some of these issues well, because I have the experience of working within it. And also, I should add that I should have said this in my presentation, given that I think most people might be from Ivy City on this call, that we are starting in the next couple of months a Ivy City climate resilience strategy. And that's kind of why I made my presentation about Southwest and Buzzer Point, because I'm hoping that that can be an example of something that that was, I think, successful in Southwest and Buzzer Point, and we can replicate differently because every community is different, but somehow in Ivy City. That said, our strategy, I don't think, is going to get into land uses, because that's not the role of the agency that is leading the strategy, DOE. Land use conversations should be had during small area plans, which is what the community just went through with the DC Office of Planning. If the community is not happy with the land use planning decisions in that small area plan, this is the public comment period. So this is the time to voice those concerns. At the end of the day, a small area plan has to be approved by council. Historically, as far as I remember, I don't think there's ever been a small area plan not approved by council, but it is an option. Doesn't have to be approved. Ivy City as a council member. So there's different avenues you can voice your opinion through. But if the community is not happy with its land uses, the small area plan is the time to make those decisions, and those decisions then should be reflected in the new comprehensive plan. If those decisions are not made now during the small area plan for Ivy City, then they will be made during the comprehensive plan, the next cycle of comprehensive plan. And that's, I think the small area plan is a better place because you have the attention. I mean, you should have had the attention of the office then. Once you wait for the citywide comprehensive plan, the last one went, it took, I don't know, years. Yeah. So I would say if the community wants, so basically the conversation is to change the industrial land uses. I guess that's what we're talking about. I think from a community perspective, basically, I think the decision is if the community doesn't want any more of industrial uses, and that gets put in the plan, then what is the alternative? The alternative to industrial uses and industrially zoned land is going to be commercial and residential development. And so then you have to work with the Office of Planning to create what that means so that it doesn't create more displacement. So I think, right, the community, the choices are both hard, right? It's keep the industrial land or change it. The only change you can go to is essentially commercial / residential, which could create more displacement, right, if you don't do it right. So those are the choices. But that conversation should happen not during the resilience plan, although we can have them if you want, but during the small area plan process.
I actually just wanted to comment on what Parisa mentioned as well in the chat, where we need more in the district, more interagency collaborations. During Mr. Herring's presentation, the way that your organization, the framework of it, it was just, it's phenomenal. The way that the information that's output is very substantial, and making sure that we're able to plan properly and look at these key factors that actually drive some very, very important information to the residents. I wanted to know from Empower DC, actually, do you all have an arm or a committee that follows what Mr. Andrea was just mentioning as far as these small area plans? Is there a committee or something for that?
Oh, excuse me, my cat is right in the mix. Yes, well, for Ivy City, we're very involved, and because we are embedded in Ivy City and have been for a couple decades and have a site there. We worked a lot on the comprehensive plan citywide for 5 years. We held monthly meetings for 5 years on that, and so we're gearing up for that again. We're definitely interested in supporting other communities who are dealing with planning initiatives. One thing to note is that in the last comprehensive plan amendment, there's new requirements now that planning and zoning utilize a so-called racial equity lens for their work. And we've been trying to track and, sort of hold accountable those agencies of what does that actually look like in practice and how are we actually changing the outcomes. Planning is really far behind. I think zoning did develop a tool for evaluating the racial equity impact, but the tool itself has not changed anything either. So we've been in touch with the zoning chairman about doing an evaluation, a roundtable to evaluate, how is that actually working. Planning just recently released their racial equity action plan. I still need to actually get through that. But again, so far we're seeing a lot of words, little action, almost no real change in outcomes. And so this is an area that we're active with and would, applied to planning. And so certainly would love to work with any communities that are interested.
Also, if I could maybe jump in there, and I'll just add that I think I mentioned we're about to announce one of the new programs. It's called Climate Smart Communities Initiative. That's the program in which we're using some of the Inflation Reduction Act dollars to recruit, train, and fund, and then match adaptation practitioners with communities. So we will be announcing a first set of 11 communities with whom we're going to be working. And we're purposefully aligning our efforts together with FEMA's CEDARS program, the Community Disaster Resilience Zones. So in addition to that sort of federal government to local government connection, we're also branching out laterally to talk to our colleagues in FEMA, in EPA, in Department, in HUD, Department of Transportation.
David, you should know that Ivy City is actually one of only 2 CEDARs in the district. So
excellent. So I belabored that just so that you guys would know that we'll be doing this over the coming years. So there may be opportunity there if, where your community could be one of our foci in the future. And even if it's not, if you said, well, we would benefit and would like to receive some of the training and some of the information resources and the frameworks that you use and so forth, you could certainly get that. We would certainly be interested to share that with you all. So, let us know if we can support you in that way.
Exactly. And just, hearing during your presentation, that pretty much the way that it spelled out was that the federal agency reached out to your federal agency to request that this plan gets produced and then implemented. So actually just knowing how to cross populate and make sure that the voices are being taken to the table is very important. And that's why I asked Parisa if you all are currently doing anything with those community plans, because it's just knowing how the matrix layers out and making sure that that voice is heard when those conversations are being held. So thank you so much for that input.
If I could also just plug again, I put in the chat, we are serving as the DC lead for the TICTAC, which is the Thriving Communities Technical Assistance Centers program funded by EPA. It's done at the regional level, and the Region 3, is led by National Wildlife Federation. The idea behind it is that impacted communities go through this intake process and then can get connected with experts who can assist with things like air monitoring or heat monitoring, or even trying to identify funding opportunities, or do GIS mapping, these types of things. It's still honestly getting off the ground, but I would love it if folks who might be interested could go ahead and do the intake. I put the link there. It should be relatively short and simple, and that way I can say that our folks have done the intake, and I can follow up to see what kinds of resources can be provided. I think they're trying to do like a lending library of monitors, for instance, and some other sort of tangible forms of assistance. And the idea, I think, for us is really to try to build the movement for EJ, right? So all of the folks on this call are doing great work. How do we build that more, cohesively as a base of power, and push environmental justice as a leading priority here in the district for legislative change, for funding resources? I put in the chat 2 environmental justice related bills that are going to be coming up for a vote probably before the end of the year that we'd really like to see passed. One is to start having a cumulative impact analysis for pollution permitting. So again, some neighborhoods are, overburdened, right? And we need to acknowledge that and stop making those same decisions. And then to actually create a resilience hub in Ward 5 at the site of a legacy polluter there. So just put the, you'll be on our list. We'll send you updates, but certainly reach out if you'd like to get, more directly involved in any of those things.
Thank you so much. I know we're at time now, but I just want to say, thank you for everyone who, attended today. Like Parisa said, it definitely is going to have to take, all of us to kind of address the climate crisis, especially within our communities. We have to, come together, collaborate, brainstorm, to really come together to shift not only our local policy, but also to make sure that we are having meaningful change within our communities. So once again, thank you all so much for taking time out of your Saturdays to be here with us. Thanks again to our panelists. Toby, I see you have your hand raised. You want to say anything as well?
Yeah, that was my mistake. Thanks, Anthony. Thanks, Parisa. Appreciate all the work time today.
Yes, thank you so much.
I have to just say, Toby's with an amazing organization in Baltimore, the South Baltimore Community Land Trust, one of our partners in the TICTAC, and again, trying to build those connections even between our cities and learn from each other is another great outcome here. And yes, Anthony, good job. Thanks, everybody. We really appreciate you joining today.
Yes, thank you. Great job, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have a good weekend.
Thank you. Great information.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Take care.